morning. I am Chief Tom Hackney, Chief of Detectives. I want to talk to you this morning a little bit about the officer involved shooting that we had yesterday afternoon. Yesterday at 5:52 p.m., officers were dispatched to the Countryside Village Trailer Park at 10,900 on the block of Beach Boulevard on Jacksonville's south side. They were dispatched to a domestic incident. The domestic incident involved a stepson and a stepfather. Stepson is identified as 41-year-old Todd Christopher Jones. He is a biracial male. And his 59-year-old stepfather, Albert Lilly. He's a black male. To give a little history on the two, they have been family members for over 20 years. Mr. Lilly was married to Jones's mom, Laverne Lilly. On April 19th, Miss Lilly succumbed to a short battle with cancer. The two had lived in the trailer for some period of time. When it was obvious that Jones and Lilly could not get along, an ultimatum was given by Mrs. Lilly about one of the two of them leaving the trailer. It was decided at that point in time that Mr. Lilly would move. Mr. Lilly moved out to the beach where he lived by himself for some point in time. After Miss Lilly's death on the 19th, the trailer was owned by Mr. Lilly before their marriage. So after her death, Mr. Lilly contacted Jones, advised him he needed to find somewhere new to live, and he needed to move out of the trailer. The incident that occurred yesterday that got the police out there was when Mr. Lilly went to the trailer at Mr. Jones' request, goes, knocks on the door. Jones throws the door open and immediately screams at him to die, die, and stabs him in the chest with a makeshift spear, which was basically a PVC pipe with a knife attached to it. Didn't say anything else other than die, die, and immediately stabs him in the chest. The two of them fell to the ground at the doorway of the trailer. Mr. Lilly reports that Jones was trying to take a black handgun from his pocket. The gun got hung up on his pocket, and that gave Mr. Lilly a chance to escape. He was able to run away, run to a neighbor's house, where he called 911. Mr. Lilly was transported by air ambulance to Shands with, yesterday he had life-threatening injuries. Luckily, he has been upgraded to serious condition, is still in Shands Hospital, and has cooperated with the police involving this. So fast forward yesterday after that, when the police arrived, Lilly told them where Jones was, that he had gone into the trailer. He was armed with a gun and with a knife, and Mr. Lilly's assessment at that point in time was he may be suicidal based on the fact that it was a clear ambush and he got set up. So the officers set up a perimeter around the trailer, moved some of the neighbors away for their own safety, vetted the fact that he was locked in the trailer. They attempted to make contact with him. He would intermittently talk to him, would not comply with their request to come out. He was told repeatedly to come out. They made contact with him by phone as well as over the PA system. He was not cooperative with their request to come out. They then decided that this is a situation, and this is a fairly common thing, you know, when we have these barricaded people, SWAT team and hostage negotiators will be called out. So that was put into place. The officers, at that point in time when SWAT was called, they established the perimeter, fortified that, made sure all areas were secure, waiting for the SWAT team to come out. When the front door to the trailer came up, and this happened around 8 o'clock, so the officers got there around 6 o'clock, and it was around 8 o'clock that the front door of the trailer flew open. You could hear the suspect screaming. Wasn't screaming anything in particular, just kind of a loud roaring type scream. He had a handgun in his hand and was charging one of the officers on the perimeter. There were 3 of the perimeter officers who used their departmentally issued AR-15. They shot the suspect, who died at the scene. The officers have been identified as 20-year veteran Joel Weeks, he's a sergeant, Officer Robert Holmes, who's a 6-year veteran, and Officer Angel Santiago, he's a 4-year veteran. All 3 of those officers have been placed on administrative leave, which is typical in a situation like this. Jones has no local arrest record. The only encounter he's had with the police was in 2009. There was a domestic disturbance between he and Lilly, and no charges were filed back then. The gun that was recovered, you can see it here, and a copy will be forwarded to you. This turns out that this was a pellet gun, a BB gun / pellet gun. That makes this an obvious suicide by cop in our opinion. He exited the trailer holding what he knew not to be a firearm, charging officers that he knew to be armed. With that, coupled that with Mr. Lilly's assessment of his actions earlier clearly makes that a suicide by cop. I can answer a few questions in reference to the case.
I understand that he came out of the trailer and with the gun, and it was fired at, and that he fell between a police car and a fence, and the officers converged on him again and fired a second time. There were two distinct shooting situations. What about that?
He was, as relayed by the officers, he was still armed with the gun when he was on the ground. He fell after initially being shot, fell on the ground, still armed with the gun. They saw him continually moving, and in order to ensure that their safety and everybody else's safety was there, they, as we all are, fired until there was no longer a threat. So you had shooting while he was standing, but also shooting while he was on the ground.
So he was still moving according to what the officers saw, and was in possession of the gun?
Still in possession of the gun.
Was he aiming that at any officers? Do you know?
He was still armed with it, and exactly what he was doing with that, I'm not sure. But keep in mind that we're looking at this today, and we know that this is a pellet gun. Right. These officers yesterday to see a suspect who has committed an aggravated battery, completed an aggravated assault running at an officer with a gun, still armed with a gun, and still a very viable threat in their opinion.
And when he was on the ground, he was still holding the gun?
Yes, he was still holding the gun. Still holding the gun.
And moving?
And moving, yes.
And you don't know how many shots were fired altogether?
A total of 21 shots were fired.
Okay. Did he fire this pellet gun at all?
I don't know if there would be a way that we could determine that.
Okay.
None of the officers involved in this were injured in any way, shape, or form. So.
And in the second round of shooting, how many shots were fired? Do you know?
I don't know exactly, and I may not be able to determine exactly today. Part of the investigation will be where we recover the shell casings at the scene, so that may help us. But today, I don't know. Wouldn't speculate on who shot from where.
There were 21 altogether.
Yeah, 21 altogether.
Have any of these three officers been involved in any officer-involved shootings before?
This is Sergeant Weetz's fourth officer-involved shooting. The other two officers that I mentioned haven't been involved in any officer-involved shootings before.
Do we know how many times Jones was hit?
At least 11 times. The autopsy is being conducted now, and I'll have a better idea of that when we get those results back. But at least 11 times, and it was safe to say several times in the upper torso.
Any other questions?
I have one more. I know you've been doing this for a while. How common is suicide by cop, and how more often lately do you see people more willing to pull a gun on a police officer?
You know, we've over the past few years that you've seen several of these incidents. I know we had one last year. The man wasn't killed, but he was shot in Springfield. He had another pellet gun that he clearly took into a situation where he raised that at officers. It just happened to be that he wasn't killed in that particular case. These happen fairly often. We had the Academy sports shooting earlier this year where somebody made some intentional acts that you wouldn't think a normal, sane person would do that would have led them to that. And here are those situations. It's hard to know exactly what mental status these people have. Obviously, if you're suicidal, you're homicidal, and if you've reached that level, normal thinking doesn't really apply. So it's hard to speculate. But here's a man who knew he had a pellet gun. He was aware that he had it. We didn't know that he had it. And if he's going to take the time to charge several officers, screaming and running and pointing at them, the anticipated result would be what he got.
Do you think suspects in general are just more apt to pull a gun on a police officer these days than they were, say, 20 years ago?
It's hard to say. You know, those are things that you can't exactly put a true figure on. The number of officers that are killed each year, it doesn't seem to go down a whole lot. And these are people who are willing to take these officers who are charged with their safety and kill them. So.
Did he ever say, "You're going to have to kill me," or anything like that? Did he ever indicate to the officers themselves that he was suicidal?
Nothing that was straight verbally like that. He made a comment that he wanted to make sure his dog was cared for. And again, you start looking at what suicidal statements could be, that if somebody's worried about taking care of their dog, that may mean that they're not going to be here to take care of it. But again, that's looking into a crystal ball that you don't exactly know what that means at the time when he says it.
Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you for your cooperation.